Well, Saturday Night Live apparently getting under President Trump's skin this weekend. President Trump tweeted, "How do the networks get away with these total Republican hit jobs without retribution? Very unfair and should be looked into. This is the real collusion." That tweet came after this sketch.
So I'm going to sign these papers for emergency, and then I'll immediately be sued, and the ruling will not go in my favor, and then I'll end up in the Supreme Court, and then I'll call my buddy Kavanaugh, and I'll say it's time to repay the Donnie, and he'll say, "New phone, who dis?" But then the Mueller report will be released, crumbling my house of cards, and I can just plead insanity and do a few months in the puzzle factory. And my personal hell of playing president will finally be over.
Joining us now is Brian Stelter, CNN chief media correspondent and anchor of Reliable Sources. The president really wants to retaliate against a comedy show. He wants somebody to look into what SNL is doing. Who? The comedy police?
Yeah, laugh so you don't cry. Seriously, look, he should not be talking about retribution. It's unpresidential. And yet, we've seen this story for the last 2 years. He'll make a ridiculous threat that's completely inappropriate, but then he doesn't do anything about it, and everybody forgets about it, and everybody moves on. I mean, he's threatened NBC's licenses in the past and then not done anything about it. But I do think he's giving Alec Baldwin exactly what Alec Baldwin wants. I could actually argue that Baldwin's sketch and his impersonations getting a little boring, getting a little tired, getting a little predictable. But then President Trump comes along and gives it new life and gives it new energy. And I think in a way, Trump keeps Baldwin going playing Trump. You know what I mean? They're locked in this twisted relationship.
This dysfunctional relationship. Well, I actually, when Baldwin at the end, when he says, "My personal hell of playing the president will be over," seemed to work both ways on that one. But in all seriousness, when the president tweets that there should be retribution, someone should look into this. Obviously, the reason nothing happens is that there is no comedy police, and we do have a First Amendment. But what is he trying to communicate? I mean, what does he think is out there that can be done to address his grievances?
Right, it's us versus them. And I think maybe, you know, the only thing that does exist in this case is the FCC, Federal Communications Commission, which does grant licenses to NBC's local television stations pretty much every time. They just get renewed automatically every 8 years. So conceivably, any president could try to meddle in that. Nixon tried to do that, 4 decades ago. That's really the only option he has other than tweeting and angrily tweeting. Baldwin shot back last night and said, "Is this a threat? You know, I'm one of the enemies of the people now. Does this constitute a threat to my family's safety?" So now they're going back and forth. Again, part of that twisted relationship. But the reality is there is nothing the president can do. And there's Baldwin's tweet saying, what about
I'll read
this?
it. Yeah, he says, "I wonder if a sitting president exhorting his followers that my role in a TV comedy qualifies me as an enemy of the people constitutes a threat to my safety and that of my family." It doesn't sound like he's laughing. I mean, I hear you that it helps Alec Baldwin's brand, I guess, or the act. But to be on the receiving end of the president saying nasty things, it's not always great. Not always a great feeling.
It is,
as you know,
deeply uncomfortable for people, whether you're a celebrity like Alec Baldwin or not. We come back and forth often with President Trump about whether there's these authoritarian impulses to try to control the media versus a kind of insecurity or even an incompetence. He's just venting. He's just complaining. Nobody takes it seriously. And that's the strange place we're in now, 2 years into the presidency, right? That he says these things that are outrageous and inappropriate, and yet we shrug it off because he never does anything about it. That's not a healthy place to be for a country.
Well, and that's a sign of normalization. And given that it's President's Day, you know, you've got to search long and hard for anything resembling a precedent for this. I mean, maybe Richard Nixon venting a spleen against the Smothers Brothers and allegedly getting the show canceled back in the day through some of his allies. But it's ironic, you know, when he talks about these actions against media companies in one country in the world where that certainly does happen, and it's the one he's giving a speech about later today, Venezuela. You know, so it does strike, I think, the surreality of the fact that we've almost come to shrug these things off. The President of the United States going after a satirical show, going after an actor.
I like what Chuck Schumer said in response to SNL, you know, because Schumer and Pelosi were parodied on Saturday night as well. And Schumer offered an alternative way to respond. Here he is saying, you know, he enjoyed the spoof. He actually linked to it. He liked it so much he linked to it. But he said, actually, I don't use a smartphone. I use a flip phone. That's kind of what we're used to from politicians. That's how politicians in the past have usually reacted to SNL.
Well, yes, but the problem is, and this is one of the very unique things about President Trump, he's humorless. He is humor impaired. This is not an original thought today. He has never been captured laughing on any camera of any kind. He has never made a joke, at least not a funny one. He's humor impaired. And so, I mean, name a time.
Humor impaired.
He's massively humor impaired. So he doesn't, I don't know if he thinks, he can't think like Chuck Schumer is to go back with a quip and say something funny and self-deprecating.
I see what you're saying.
Impossible.
I see.
Well, and actually, the few times I have seen him make a scripted self-deprecating joke, it's been very effective. Self-deprecating humor is very effective for politicians.
Definitely.
But because he's sort of humor deficient, certainly that's not happening off the cuff.
You would think he would want to go on SNL, be in on the joke, be part of the joke. After all, he did do that before becoming president. But maybe something changed along the way. And I think the one that's benefiting here is Alec Baldwin. He's the one that's benefiting because his impersonation gets new life whenever the president complains about it.
Or maybe increased awareness of the First Amendment.
That too, that's a good thing too.